Welcome to the Indiana State Board of Accounts virtual training session on the OMB Compliance Supplement. My name is Susan Gordon, and I work in a new section of the State Board of Accounts that provides advisory services to state agencies. It is our goal to provide useful information to you that will help you in your efforts to comply with various statutes, regulations, and uniform compliance guidelines, as well as planning for your next audit or resolving prior audit findings. This session is geared toward helping you plan for your federal audit by letting you know what the auditor is looking for and why. So with that being said, I would like to introduce you to the Compliance Supplement. The Compliance Supplement is an appendix in the Code of Federal Regulations, 2 CFR 200 Appendix 11, and it's an audit guide for auditors of federal programs. So if you would like to know the compliance requirements that will be tested and how they will be tested, you will want to review this document. I have the link here to the latest OMB Compliance Supplement, and it's also available on our website. The 2022 supplement is effective for audits of fiscal years beginning after June 30, 2021. What is the purpose of the Compliance Supplement? The Compliance Supplement identifies compliance requirements that the federal government expects to be considered as part of an audit. The Compliance Supplement also provides information for auditors on program objectives, laws and regulations, program procedures, compliance requirements, audit objectives, and suggested audit procedures. The Compliance Supplement is written by the federal awarding agencies. They are responsible for informing OMB of any updates needed to the supplement and working with OMB to ensure that the supplement focuses the auditor on testing compliance requirements most likely to cause improper payments, fraud, waste, or abuse, or that will generate audit findings for which the federal awarding agency will take sanctions. Why is this important? Well, obviously this is important to auditors, but it's also very important to you. It's important because it can significantly impact the way you plan for an audit of your programs. Even though the Compliance Supplement is written to auditors, you as the grantee have the opportunity to review the supplement, and that allows you to know the audit expectations of the federal government, and more specifically, know which federal compliance requirements will be audited, know what audit procedures will be used, and know what documentation is expected. All of this provides opportunities for efficiency in the audit and for your operations in general. One thing that you do have to keep in mind, because the Compliance Supplement is written for auditors, it will not contain all of the compliance requirements that you're responsible to follow for your programs. You will find those in your grant documents, laws and regulations, and so on. The Compliance Supplement will tell you which requirements will be audited. So let's look at the structure of the Compliance Supplement. The supplement is divided into several parts, and we will look at those individually. You can see that in Part 1, it includes the background and purpose of the Compliance Supplement. By the way, this document is 1,968 pages long, so you won't be reading the entire thing. We will talk about how to navigate your way through it so you can find what you need. You're going to want to start with Part 2, which has the matrix of compliance requirements. The matrix identifies the federal programs and the associated compliance requirements addressed in the supplement. This is what the matrix looks like in Part 2 of the Compliance Supplement. Across the top, you see columns A through N, which name the federal compliance requirements, all the way from column A for activities allowed or unallowed to column N for special tests and provisions. Each row corresponds to a program number, and there is one row for each program. You can also see that each program requirement, you can also see that each compliance requirement for each program is designated with a Y or N. For example, column A, activities allowed or unallowed, for program 10.500 is marked Y. That means that the State Board of Accounts will audit this requirement for program 10.500. You will also see for program 10.500 that column I, related to procurement, suspension, and debarment, is marked with an N. This means the Board of Accounts will not audit that requirement because the federal government has determined that it is not necessary for us to audit that requirement this year. Even though we will not be auditing the compliance requirement, the grantee is still responsible for compliance if the requirement is applicable. So, in summary, the matrix of compliance requirements shows by program which compliance requirements will be audited for the year. Part 3 contains 12 sections labeled A through N, which correspond to the matrix of compliance requirements. For example, if you want to know about period of performance, then the information would begin on page 3H1, because this is part 3, and period of performance is discussed in column H of the matrix. The purpose of Part 3 is to provide information for general compliance requirements that may be applicable to any program. It is not to provide information about specific program requirements, as those are covered in Part 4. But if you wanted to know more information, let's say about period of performance, and you looked in Part 3, Section H, you would have information related to the compliance requirement itself, the source of that requirement, the audit objectives, suggested audit procedures for internal control, and suggested audit procedures for compliance. So you will first want to look in Part 2 to see if the compliance requirement is to be audited. Then you can come to Part 3 to see what the compliance requirement says and the audit expectations as provided by the federal government. Then you will want to go to Part 4 to check any program-specific compliance requirements. Part 4 discusses program objectives, program procedures, and compliance requirements that are specific to a particular program. This section is ordered by ALN. So if you wanted to know all of the specific program requirements for program 10.500, you would start with page 4-10.500-1. Now remember, you will need to read parts 3 and 4 together because part 3 contains general compliance requirements, whereas part 4 contains specific compliance requirements. Parts 2, 3, and 4 will be the ones you are most interested in to see which compliance requirements are being audited and what the audit procedures will be. However, the compliance supplement does have other parts which provide further guidance on audit expectations. Part 5 discusses clusters of programs. So there is information on what those are and how the auditor is supposed to handle those. Part 6 discusses internal controls, and this is a very useful section. As a condition of receiving federal awards, the state agrees to comply with laws, regulations, and provisions of grant agreements, and also to maintain internal control to provide reasonable assurance of compliance with these requirements. Auditors must obtain an understanding of your internal control over federal programs sufficient to plan the audit and testing of internal controls. So this Part 6 addresses the objectives, principles, and components of internal controls based on the standards for internal control of the federal government, also known as the Green Book, that's issued by the Government Accountability Office, and the Internal Control Integrated Framework issued by the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations of the Treadway Commission. It also includes appendices that include illustrations of entity-wide internal controls over federal awards. You'll find those in Appendix 1, as well as illustrations of internal controls specific to each type of compliance requirement, and you can find those in Appendix 2. Part 7 offers guidance for auditing programs not included in the compliance supplement, and Part 8 is an appendix. Hopefully, this review of the structure of the compliance supplement will help as you navigate your way through it to find what you need. In summary, the compliance supplement is a great tool that you can use to help prepare for the audit, but it does not contain all of the compliance requirements applicable to your grants. You will always want to look at your grant agreement and award letter, various laws and regulations to determine the compliance requirements for your grants. The compliance supplement does identify compliance requirements that will be audited by State Board of Accounts. And in the compliance supplement, you'll find stated audit objectives for each grant and grant compliance requirement, as well as suggested audit procedures that are very specific for the testing of internal controls and compliance. We hope that this information will be useful for you to determine the most efficient and effective way to prepare for an audit. If you have any questions about how to use the compliance supplement or the information contained in the compliance supplement, please feel free to contact us. We would be happy to meet with you. Thank you for listening.